Hi there, and thank you so much for joining this episode of Wind Down Wednesday. My name is Antonia Berry. I am the CEO and Chief Strategist at Strategy Academy. Today, we are going to talk about return on investment for your development efforts, regardless of what they look like, right? And regardless of what those efforts for. I'm going to use a very basic example for you to get an understanding of how you would calculate your return on investment. For example, sponsorship of a conference or perhaps sponsorship of a golf outing, right? So let's say that you invested $5,000 into the sponsorship of a golf tournament. With that sponsorship came 4 spots for you to put players in. It came with a foursome. So now you have 4 players that can go in. Of the 4 players, perhaps, of course, one would be yourself. And then perhaps you can invite 3 prospective clients that perhaps you might have been courting for some time, or perhaps you want to get some one-on-one time with to build a relationship with them, to get them all together. Perhaps it might be an opportunity for you to refer back, work back and forth between you guys, or perhaps like I said, it might just be that you are just wanting to be able to spend time with them, to get to know them better, to get to understand their business, for them to understand your business and you to understand theirs, and then for you to build that relationship where work can potentially be generated from those prospective clients, or perhaps a referral type relationship could be established. Now, if you were to, like I said, invest $5,000 into the sponsorship, and after the golf outing, you and these individuals then become closer, the relationships become much more established, and you now have these solidified relationships where there's a common understanding that you're going to refer back work between you guys, and perhaps they essentially now understand what your practice is about, so they can send you client work that perhaps you wanted but never was able to get that work before. So what would you do? You would take advantage of this sponsorship opportunity. Like I said, you would attend, you would build the relationships, you would follow up after, just keep the conversation going, keeping the relationship and the connection warm or hot in this case. And then you would measure over time. I would say give it 6 to 12 months, because business development in the legal marketing / legal business development space is a long game. It's not a short game. Oftentimes referred to as a marathon and not a sprint. And just look at how much work has either come in directly from these prospective clients or has been referred into your firm by these prospective clients. The value of that work that has come in is going to be what you generate in revenue, right? That's what has come in, right? That's the bulk money that's come in. Now, if you want to know what your return on investment is on this specific, investment that you made into a sponsorship, you would take your $5,000 and you would minus that amount from whatever the total revenue amount was that was brought in by these prospective clients, or were prospective clients, now clients. That now tells you what your return is on the investment that you made. Perhaps it was 6 or 12 months ago to take these individuals out to play golf on a sponsorship that you took advantage of, right? So that is one way that, and that is being very cut and dry. And I prefer it that way when you're starting out to do measurements and looking at metrics to see where there has been success or not. So if you're looking at, what it really is or was that you gained, this is a quick and nifty way for you to be like, yes, I see a positive return on investment here. Or the alternative could be that you gave $5,000 and you're looking at the relationship between you and these individuals at 6 months, 12 months, even at 18 months, just to give it a bit of a stretch to see if anything has developed. If there's been no development on these, then your return on investment did not really amount to anything. And instead, hoping that this was a 501c3 that you sponsored, so that at a minimum you can at least write this off on your taxes for your business, right? So I don't want you to give up and think that, if perhaps it turns the opposite way where you didn't make a return on the investment, that it was a complete waste, because it's not. You still spent time with these individuals. They now know you, you now know them. And even though the relationship just yet in measuring it at 6 or 12 months has not amounted in anything, you don't have a return on investment to be able to say that you were able to obtain in a positive side right now. It doesn't mean that later it can't turn into something, but as of right now, if that sponsorship was to come up again, taking those same people out for sure perhaps would not be something that I would do. I would recommend that you do. Perhaps you'd look at something else to do with them, or you perhaps need to evaluate whether or not these were good prospects to begin with. So, just some food for thought. And of course, each and every situation is going to be different and unique. You really need to evaluate, if perhaps your return on investment did not turn in the positive direction. You need to evaluate perhaps if you were looking at these individuals as prospects and really and truly they were not good prospects. They were not, perhaps the type of client that you would actually or should actually be going at. Now, if all of those things check out and it's an absolute no, then perhaps, that might not be what you would want to do again going forward. And you might want to invest that business development spend somewhere else. So that's a little bit of a ROI. Of course, you could elaborate so much on ROI, whether it turns positive or negative. And you can even find new opportunities where ROI perhaps didn't turn out to be how you wanted it to be, but it can still be a learning experience that points you in the right direction. So don't be discouraged if it doesn't turn out to be the way that you want it to be. However, I do want to say that if you wanted to really measure and to determine whether or not something was worth repeating, especially if it's a big investment into the effort, this is one way that you can look at it, by looking at what you generated as opposed to what you spent, and then doing the math and understanding if there was a positive return on investment. So that's all for this episode of Wind Down Wednesday. Thank you again so much for joining. My name is Antonia Berry. I am the CEO and Chief Strategist of Strategy Academy. Thank you so much for joining, and I hope that you have a fantastic day. Bye now.